Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Catherine Garcia, and I'm excited to be the moderator for today's webinar, Q&A Overcoming Current Ag Challenges. I am excited to turn it over to Chris Clark, who will be moderating most of the questions and leading the discussion with our two panelists for the rest of the webinar.
All right, thank you, Kate. I'm Chris, your moderator today. I represent AgSource, a network of testing laboratories in Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, as well as our agronomic AgSource consulting team, who provide manure nutrient management plans, grid soil sampling, precision ag technologies, and scouting for clients of all sizes and locations. AgSource continues to advance forward in defining the whys behind laboratory data and the hows when it comes to providing farmers with the knowledge, the information, and the insights needed to take your crops and your ag business to the next level. Today's webinar are two of my favorite coworkers on part of the agronomic consulting team. Timothy Boerner is a 1981 agronomy graduate of UW-Madison. He's worked his entire career in agronomy, formerly selling fertilizer and seed, and today works with AgSource. He is a Wisconsin CCA, he's 4R certified, and a technical service provider. He works in northwestern Wisconsin and serves as a wealth of knowledge to the farms that he consults for. In his free time, you'll find him floating the river with his dog Bella, fishing for walleyes, or canning some homegrown salsa. He truly has a green thumb for healthy crops. Also, we have Haley Sand, a graduate from University of Wisconsin River Falls, who then obtained her master's in agronomy from UW-Madison, working with Dr. Lebowski on crop fertility, more specifically nitrogen management. She is a nutrient management and GPS specialist for AgSource Laboratories in Western Wisconsin and is a certified crop advisor in both Wisconsin and Minnesota. She has her 4R certification as well. In her free time, she's a super mom and enjoys pontooning and hunting, as well as running a popular sweet corn and pumpkin business. Take a look at the variety of words on this slide. This image reveals that unlike most presentations, this webinar is not focusing on just one topic. Due to the domino effect of multiple factors challenging agriculture, 2022 is shaping up to be one of the most challenging for farmers in recent history. Thus, the importance of this webinar to help you plan ahead. There are growing concerns over pricing. The availability of so many products is challenged, and questions about the ag supply chain. What about labor? We know that truck drivers, applicators, and farm labor are the hardest to hire for. We note that the topics of pandemic, international politics and war, price inflation, chemical active ingredients, greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution, climate change, even carbon markets, they deserve an entire presentation, but they're not today's main focus, as we chose items that farmers and crop consultants could possibly address before planters hit the fields within a few weeks in southern states. I'm really excited for the webinar, as the AgSource team together captured many one-on-one conversations with farmers on the items that are presented today. It is our goal to get each of you thinking, take some notes, and then continue the conversation with your experts after the webinar, because no two farms are alike. Let's begin the adventure with getting a feel for what the buzz Tim and Haley have been hearing as they travel farm to farm. Haley, let's get your answer first.
Sure. Yeah, the first thing that customers are really bringing up to me are fertilizer prices. My advice from the get-go is focus on phosphorus and potassium and work from there. If phosphorus and potassium are not in balance, then we won't have proper end-use efficiency. Therefore, you'll be throwing money down the drain. If you have P and K at their optimums, roughly a 1-to-5 ratio, so that's 25 parts per million phosphorus and 125 parts per million potassium, then we can consider nitrogen. As prices are high, consider lowering your nitrogen rate a little bit to hit that point where there is more yield gain per unit of nitrogen and therefore a better ROI. Then we can worry about the micros.
Those were really good points, Haley. And the one thing that won't change is that yield is still going to be really key. For the most influence toward the yield on the farm, they know that they need to start with the best seed genetics, then plant on the right date for your area, And then many farmers have to position themselves to combat weeds. And that's been a challenge this year as far as chemical availability. But what may be a little bit different is to focus on phosphorus and potassium before nitrogen. And we're going to try and cover some of those things today. Remember that your plant needs proper amounts of P and K before any added nitrogen will contribute to the yield. If you don't like looking at your soil tests, find someone who can help you. Tim, what have you been hearing for buzz on your travels?
Well, for most of the 2022 crop planting season, it's been, the hot topics have been fertilizer, of course, like Haley mentioned, and crop protection product availability. Skyrocketing prices are definitely something on everyone's mind. I've had a lot of questions and I've done some research on alternative fertility inputs. There's been some talk about alternative crops, growing low input, high value crops. It's amazing to me that oats is still hanging around that $7 a bushel level. And it really is a cheap crop to grow, fertility and crop protection wise. As something you already mentioned, Chris, too, the agribusiness employment candidates, it's amazing how we can't find anybody to work on farms. Another topic was that crop value rose more than 30% last year, and it's probably going to raise some more this year. And in relation to that, what about the crop input products, or the crop protection and fertility? Perpetual hot topics we're always talking about is nitrogen use efficiency. It always makes a big difference to, there we go. Didn't have my camera on, I guess. It always makes a big difference every year to get the most value out of your nitrogen inputs. But then you look at what's been going on for the last couple of weeks with Russia, and potash availability has now become a really hot topic. Canada is our biggest supplier of potash. They produce 14 million metric tons a year, but Russia produces 9 million metric tons, and Belarus 8 million metric tons. And then fourth on the list is China at about 6 million metric tons. So where's our potash going to come from this year? Increased fuel costs. Russia's contribution to the global fuel market is huge. Next slide.
Yep, thanks, Tim. Farmers don't often have a lot of extra time, and they want to do what they're really good at and just farm. So, but we know that phosphorus, manure, nitrogen applications are regulated depending on where you live, sometimes both state and within your county. Over your career since 1981, Tim, how have you seen farming change because of regulations and increased regulations?
Why do we nutrient management plan? That's the big one that we worked with, is the regulations based on that. Efficient, environmentally effective crop planting is really something that we should always be looking at. Nitrogen use efficiency, which I touched on a little bit. How do we get the most out of each nitrogen dollar? And then simply just stretching the fertilizer budget. Chris, next slide. If we look back on the regulatory history, anybody that's taken a soils class or ag history class remembers those gruesome scenes from when the Dust Bowl years. We remember a story about the senators and the legislature in Washington seeing a cloud of dust coming all the way to Washington. So the Soil Conservation Service was created in the 30s, and it's that they've made a lot of progress in keeping soil where it's supposed to be. In the 60s, Great Lakes pollution, fish kills, Lake Erie was actually burning. The Clean Water Act of the 1970s targeted point sources from industry and sewage treatment plants and really cleaned that up quite a bit, to the point where Lake Erie is now had become one of the top walleye fisheries in the whole country. Hypoxic events were really something that came to the forefront and we got a lot of attention from that during the 1990s. Originally, what spun out of the Clean Water Act in the 70s was the point source, but now in the 90s it kind of switched to the non-point sources. The next slide. The 590 Nutrient Management Code is what we are going by in Wisconsin. It's become the nutrient management standard. It's administered by NRCS and the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. It outlines what's required from a nutrient management plan. We make annual updates, requires all sources of nutrients to be included, and plans are nitrogen and phosphorus based. Chris? This is just a quick rendering of where does the nutrients come from. There's a lot of inputs into our potential water issues. Nitrogen or nitrates are generally a groundwater issue, and that could come from septic fields, it could come from fertilizer, manure, a lot of different sources. The surface water is really most influenced by phosphorus being run off with soil and plant nutrients in the surface runoff. If you look at this picture, you see that about 50% of the water that from the Midwest ends up on the Mississippi River and flows into the Gulf of Mexico. This has developed a hypoxic zone that's bigger than many of the original 13 colonies in the United States. It's definitely a big area of concern with fish kills, and the hypoxic can also be described as a dead zone because really nothing grows there. And it's way bigger than the BP oil spill was back a couple of decades ago. So it's definitely a big concern, and why we do have issues. Farmers' attitudes about manure are changing from a disposal problem to a beneficial reuse opportunity. And if you look at how much we spend on feeding the animals and caring and comforting them, a lot of it comes out with the products that we are looking for. But there's always the potential for losses to the atmosphere, to the groundwater. So really, that's one of the things that Haley and I work closely with farmers is to try to minimize the environmental impacts and maximize the reuse of the nutrients that are already on the field. Nutrient management is managing crop fertility inputs. It's defined as another production practices for efficient crop growth and water quality protection. Nutrient management plans for site-specific situations minimize undesired environmental effects while optimizing farm profits and production. One of the things that I've always really appreciated about the nutrient management planning are the restriction mapping. You know, we manage the resources on areas of the fields where we grow crops. We try to minimize or eliminate nutrients leaving those sites and getting into the protection areas. I've always said that one of the really big advantages to restriction mapping is identifying the soils that have potential to lose nitrates to the groundwater if nutrients are applied at areas or times of the year where they are going to be subject to leaching. There's a story that I've been telling for years is when I grew up on the little dairy farm where I worked as a kid. When we would get to times of the year when the snow was too deep to haul manure, or if there were crops in the field, my uncle would say, "Well, just haul it to the piling spot." we were uninformed. We were probably creating a point source problem just with that. Since the advent of the 590 and the nutrient management planning, we've been able to identify the sensitive areas and separate them from the least sensitive areas. And now with developing the programs further, we realize that there's certain times of the year that maybe you should not apply nutrients onto certain soil types and save them for the times of the year when the crop can use it most quickly.
That really does help explain how nutrient management, especially in reference to expensive inputs like nitrogen, or where and when to put down manure and fertilizer, is then tied to the environment. We also do recognize that on the horizon, there will be more enforcement and efforts to ensure compliance of these environmental laws. And the ball usually gets rolling from citizen complaints. So maintaining really good relations within the community will help reveal the importance of taking more time to explain any of the stewardship practices that your farm has. Haley, what characteristics do growers have in common that are better able to adapt to some of these expected or unexpected regulations and challenges and position their farm for the future?
Yeah, adaptation, it's huge. Persistence, drive, and innovation come through and shine. My growers are constantly thinking about what they can do next to diversify and or become more efficient in a single area of the farm or the entire farm. So persistence and drive has shown up in Wisconsin, specifically in the instance of rye. Rye has become more and more common, whether it's used as a cover crop or harvested for a forage in the spring, to the point where we have begun to have surplus amounts. Moving into 2022, I've had more growers express interest and have planted wheat just to try a different market. And actually, wheat prices look really good, or they did at least yesterday when I looked at them. Being innovative, trying new things on farm to see it for themselves. I can preach to the choir in regards to different studies happening around the state, studies that I have done, so on and so forth. But for it to be truly impactful, the grower needs to see it firsthand, whether it's building their own equipment or trying different products or planting into a living cover to see how a field fares. It all just see it firsthand, do it themselves, or do some sort of like plot day to share with your other neighbors kind of a thing. Moving forward into the future, we have to think about public perception. It's huge. So thinking along the lines of a green blanket or a cover crop, it looks nice in the fall and it aids in protecting the soil. Good public perception, right? Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Haley. In years like this, with where we've had a lack of snow cover in Wisconsin, where I'm coming to you from, I've seen so many more fields within the last 3-4 years that are covered with cover crops. So people are trying it. They're giving it a try on some of their fields. Tim, what are your thoughts about this question?
Well, I like Haley's take on public perception because really farms are under the scrutiny of a lot of people that don't really understand farming. So keeping up good relationships with your neighbors is really a great idea. But when you look at regulations, pricing, product availability, and all those things, I have to say that growers have always had to deal with changing issues. And it's their adaptability that's really made successful farmers stand out from others. Dealing with the regulations takes understanding it and then complying with them. And that's something that Haley and I work with every day with growers. Pricing swings are farming constant, and successful operations tend to try to level out the highs and the lows. Growers with access to manure have a valuable fertilizer resource, and it's something that farmers should really be focusing in on this year. Some of the things that farmers had me look into are green manure or different types of alternate fertility sources. But based on a 2020 manure test result that our lab had done, a 12,000 gallon per acre application rate had a commercial fertilizer value of $127 per acre in 2020, with the current fertilizer prices, the same rate and manure test, that manure has a value of $474 per acre. So the value of your manure has increased greatly as the price of fertilizer. Product availability might take changing crop plans. Successful farm operations embrace diversity and have an ability to quickly adapt.
Yeah, so it sounds like moving forward, farmers just have to continue to be flexible. And I'll also note that any of those supporting ag businesses have to be flexible too. We know that we need to do things differently moving forward. I mean, farmers have had to change their farming practices, like Tim said, in regards to regulations. And change will forever be constant. It may not always be easy, but it'll always be something that's a part of agriculture. One of the parts of change is on a farm is new technology. Tim, what have you been seeing as like the favorite technologies or the most implemented technologies on a farm?
I'd say the thing that really sticks out is GPS compatibility. And all the new combines seem to have the potential to track and record harvest variations in fields, which can be very useful information for future field and crop planning. Another thing with the GPS compatibility is what I've heard said many times, that once you drive an auto steer tractor, you never want to go back to a manual steer tractor again. Having worked in co-ops and having worked with crop protection, one of the big GPS advantages is that we no longer use foam to mark spraying patterns. What the GPS-abled rigs have really done have eliminated skips and eliminated doubling up and really saved on the total spray that's put out on a field. And then GPS planters eliminate wedge rows and overrun. And I've heard some phenomenal cost savings based on not doubling up on seed planting or your input as you're putting the seed into the ground.
So it really does sound like GPS grid soil sampling has a lot of opportunities for farmers to work with ag dealers to use that technology together in years like this. Haley, how would you answer this question for the top technologies on the farm you're seeing?
Yeah, so adding another layer to Tim's like GPS compatibility and planting maps and all that kind of thing, you can also have a layer of grid soil sampling. So with a 2.5 acre or smaller grid size, we can take it a step further and create variable rate recommendations. We are seeing just in VRT applications of lime, you're essentially paying for the soil sampling by what you save in that VRT lime cost versus that flat rate lime application. The rest of the nutrients after that are just icing and sprinkles on the cake. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I'm hearing maybe like a lot of people really should take a closer look at the technology that they already have, because in a year like this, they want to be able to use it to the fullest potential. So maybe find that company rep, refresh yourself on some of the software and the training that you do have, because that technology can help reduce inputs, reduce your labor, and protect your resources and keep your livestock and crops healthy. So one thing as well is I've never heard a researcher say we have too much data or we have sent enough lab tests or enough tests to the lab, but data can be really overwhelming on a farm. Haley, can you explain how you help farmers use all of that data?
You bet. So when we take soil samples, there's several soil samples to a field. And a lot of times when we're looking at it, we're looking at the field side. So just like whole field average, but if we want to dig in further to do VRTs, we can do that. But I really like to use a soil test comparison sheet. If I could get the next slide. So for this to be a true comparison, I am resampling the same points, and I try to resample from the same time of year, so fall to fall or spring to spring. When sifting through the data, I mark with a plus in orange where the soil test is building or increasing, a 0 in green where soil test is maintaining, and a minus in blue if we're decreasing or if we're mining in our soil test. So then I take the average soil test for each field, which is popped up in the background here, from the prior sampling year, which was in 2017, and I compare it to the last sampling, which in this case was 2021. And I go through and mark accordingly to that key for pH, phosphorus, and potassium. So if I could get another click, we're going to look at the 62-acre field in particular. So the older, or the 2017 soil test is on top, the newer soil test is on the bottom. So I'm comparing pH, phosphorus, and potassium. It looks like they have orange pluses, so we've increased in soil tests or we've built. Now looking at the key, we can see that pH, our target pH for alfalfa is 6.8. This is a dairy, so I'm wanting to have a higher pH. So the pH here has built to 7. Not horrendous, it's totally fine, but something we don't want to build too much higher. Moving on to phosphorus, we've again built, but from 54 to 100 parts per million. So if we look at the key, phosphorus says 20 to 50 parts per million is roughly our optimum. And so that's where we built a little bit too high, and we're going to want to try and decrease. And then moving on to potassium, we have also built from 101 to 178. Our optimum is 125. So in that instance, building was great. So now we're going to look at the 52-acre field. There we go. Again, old soil test is on the top, new soil test is on the bottom. pH is at 7, just like before. That's hunky-dory, fine and dandy. And then our phosphorus and potassium have decreased. Okay, so phosphorus has decreased from 106 to 73, much closer to our optimum. Good job, farm. Potassium has moved from 120 to 109. Okay, it's decreased. All right, we're getting farther away from our optimum. Okay, we're going to have to consider putting potash on in this field. So this is just one of the ideas as far as looking at some of the data. And we do look at a lot of the data that we collect throughout the years. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, so instead of lots and lots of multiple soil reports, you've kind of tabulated that into an Excel document for your growers, which is really a helpful tool to focus it in. Tim, how do you help simplify the data for your farm clients?
Well, I think that soil test data or soil test history is always interesting to compare over time. And if we've been doing a nutrient plan for a number of years, we can see how they've changed. And I really like Haley's example there of the pluses and minuses to see where we're going on it. But for somebody that doesn't soil test regularly, a new soil test can really help growers avoid expensive mistakes. If you're going to seed down a field with alfalfa and your pHs are in the low 5s or too low, you run the risk of putting in seed that's not going to grow, or at least not be very thrifty. And I've actually had some grain farmers that I've soil tested for that have said that they wouldn't put soybeans in a field that has a low pH, a low 5 pH. Another form of data comes out of the nutrient management plans, and the SNAP nutrient management plan report shows UW recommendations for each planned field and crop. And it shows the planned fertility inputs that we've put in there. And the most interesting thing that I find, and I like pointing out to farmers, is how far are we over or under the field fertility plan. And I'll get back to the nutrient restriction maps too. That data I think is really, really important to farmers. And I know that those maps show the high risk or low risk fields for specific crop and fertility decisions, and can really help maximize fertility efficiency. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for adding to helping just understand all that data that's out there. Some of the other things that I know your coworkers do is they can help with some precision ag technologies and take information from their yield monitors and help with writing VRT recs and VRT planting recs too. So lots of different things that you and your coworkers are doing. Another question I remember that we discussed at length at a staff meeting is with the farm budgets being squeezed a little bit, you know, how are you able to help growers? And Haley, I think you had a response to this first.
Yeah, so big thing is test, don't guess. We can take manure tests, we can take soil tests, we can take tissue tests. Figure out what's there, what you're playing with, to figure out the actual value. So like Tim gave the example as far as manure, the value a couple years ago was a lot cheaper this year because fertilizer prices, it's worth something. So when it comes to soil testing, by investing in a soil test, which in Wisconsin are considered to be sufficient for 4 cropping seasons, we can figure out which fields can afford to be mined for a year, which fields need to be maintained, and then which need the most help by building. So we'll get another click, couple clicks here. So one more click. So here we can see we have the build, the maintain, and the skip. So I sorted everything by pH, phosphorus, and potassium from low to high. And in blue, I have highlighted where it's like lower than our optimum values, I guess you could say. So those are the ones that you're going to want to, I would suggest, hit first. Maintain, obviously, crop removal application would be just fine. And if you decided to skip, you can skip on the bottom third. Next slide, please. And one more click. Another spreadsheet I put together for growers is this. This is another option, I should say. So just splitting it in half, top priority and bottom priority. It's up to them. I've gotten the conversation started at least and offered suggestions. It's their turn to follow through. Thank you.
Yeah, once again, very helpful to a grower. Instead of just doing what they've always done in a year like this, they need to be flexible and think about trying something different. So nice presentation there. Tim, do you have anything to add to Haley's response?
Yeah, well, that was really good description by Haley there, but a couple things I would add are that growers need to take all the nutrient credits they can. I know in past years, when the fertilizer was cheap, they would still put on what the crop removal was without totally considering what they're putting on with their manure and the June credit. Take them all. They're all valuable. And on a year where prices our budgets are being squeezed, you really should be looking at them. Utilize pre-side dress nitrate testing to squeeze your nitrogen budget. See how much is left over from the year before. And I know we have a point coming up on drought and how much is left over after a drought year, but I think you could really utilize that every year. And then I know I've said it before, but practice nitrogen use efficiency. That's really a good way to stretch your budget is utilize nitrogen anchors, that slow conversion or mineralization to the more mobile leachable forms where they get away from you and they don't do the crop any good at all. Time your nitrogen feeding as close to crop demand as possible. Consider the soil type and time of year when making your fertility applications. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and your intuition was right because here it is. So since mid-February, the USDA has a whopping 72% of the United States in at least some stage of drought. And it hasn't been that high at this time of the year since 2012. So Tim, what kind of tips can you share about what are suggestions for entering another dry season?
Well, I already touched on the pre-side dress nitrogen testing, but pre-plant nitrogen testing. And following the drought year of 1988, where anybody around the Midwest was aware of it, UW came out with a pre-plant nitrate test. And the good thing about the evolution of that test is in '89, they were promoting sampling to a 3-foot depth. Well, I can tell you that that sampling at a 3-foot depth and trying to pull that probe back out sent me to the chiropractor. So I'm glad we're no longer sampling to that depth. But yeah, throughout year, last year can sometimes lead to some nitrogen carryover, which we could take advantage of. So thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and then just another reminder is remember that those mobile nutrients in the soil, when it's really dry, they have a difficult time getting to your plant without water. So they include nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and sulfur. And so you might see a low result for them if you do a plant tissue test, even though you've provided for it in your fertility program. So you'll need to either do a rain dance, invest in irrigation, because they won't become available to the plant until there has been rain again or water there. So let's dive into nitrogen. We know that right now nitrogen is one of the highest costs per unit currently. So according to the USDA, again, the Ag Marketing Service, they had anhydrous up 315%. Urea is up 214%, and liquid nitrogen in some areas is up 290%. Haley, you have some excellent insight because you did your master's project focused on nitrogen management. Can you share with the listeners what are best practices for nitrogen that can be utilized this year?
Sure. I always tell my customers, within reason as far as the budget goes, I'm here to tell you like what's available, and it's totally up to you if you want to invest. So like Tim was saying, the PPNT, or the pre-plant nitrate test, he was talking about the PSNT, or the pre-sidedress nitrate test. Those are both soil samples that are collected in the spring. Applying fertilizer in furrow versus broadcast. Obviously in furrow, you're going to have closer to the seed, you can put on less. Using manure, but still applying N up front to help with the C/N ratio. Mother Nature can throw a wrench into our current plans. So far, we're looking pretty dry in the U.S. Are we going to be planting in the dust, hammered with rain? And products react differently to all these different scenarios that Mother Nature can throw at us. So it's really hard to specifically say one thing or the other, suggesting you should do, urea, surface apply, all that kind of stuff. So for example, ESN is a polymer coated urea prill. The plastic coating gives that urea buoyancy, but it also protects it from volatilizing in the air. With that buoyancy though, if there's a substantial rainfall where there could be washing, that urea can also wash away. Ideally, yes, we incorporate, but it's not always done. So how much of that spring nitrogen is still there? In other words, we don't really know unless we test. So doing that PPNT or the PSNT to see how much we carried over from fall, whether that was manure application or if we did any nitrogen application in the fall. Typically, we don't do a whole lot of that in northern Wisconsin. This year especially, taking a simple test, whether that's tissue or soil, each covering a 20-acre chunk, can be used synonymously to see what's available in the soil and the end status of the plant. It's a minor investment compared to throwing an extra nitrogen just to be safe. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, lots of really good tips there. And with the record high price of nitrogen, I think that should cause every farm of any size to really look at the rates and try and look at efficiently applying it this year. And there is, I'm an agronomist, CCHU, there's this common misconception out there, especially tied to nitrogen, that more is better, right? You're going to get more yield. But because of that consequence, we do have this tendency to put on just a little bit more to be safe. But in years like this, it's going to be costly. So utilizing those types of tools that are out there to help you fine tune things is going to be really helpful. There was a study that I saw came across my email from Texas A&M that was released in January, where they were looking at a lot of this stuff. And they projected that for the cost of fertilizer for just corn and soybean growers, it was going to be on average $148,000 higher this year. So Tim, what can growers do to prioritize different sources of NP and K products this year, or consider alternative options?
Well, I guess I'm of the old school and I used to sell fertilizer. So obviously nitrogen is what everybody looks at. That's where they always said that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck. But we need to remember if the soil test levels are low for other nutrients, spending a lot on nitrogen won't give you your best return on investment. The plant isn't able to utilize it unless it's got the other macronutrients and the other nutrients it needs. That being said, I also wouldn't spend money on micronutrients, because there's other things that are needed more if your soil test shows that. One of the things about other products and that I've always think about is there's a lot of different claims out there, but our Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection requires a guaranteed fertilizer analysis of products sold in the state. So growers really need to compare the prices of the actual nutrients in the products before they try something new. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, that kind of leads into the next question that we have here. We've got a lot of new products that come out into the market, and there's some new ones for nitrogen stabilizers, foliar applications, microbiologicals. We even have had nitrogen fixing corn that's out there, seed treatments. Haley, how can a grower best sift through them this year?
Sure, yeah. So my first call is usually to one of my advisors who was a part of my master's committee. As I work closely with the agronomy and soil fertility extension specialists, it's always good to call them. They or their counterparts in other states typically get to try these products before they are released for public use. So I can always try and find information either from them or just online from university-based research projects. This way there isn't any product bias. The next step will be trying an on-farm field trial. These trials, they don't have to be big. All you need is the right parameters to make it a true comparison. A lot of times it takes running a check or an untreated area. This area does not, again, have to be huge, just big enough to, one, that you remember and you can avoid with particular applications, and two, you can pick up on the yield monitor. There have been some products out there that are supposed to help with nitrogen production, but when I spoke with growers, they just added the product to their current fertilizer regimen, where N was already applied in ample amounts and a response to nitrogen was going to be unlikely. In this case, nitrogen should have been applied at suboptimal rates, say at 150 pounds of nitrogen versus the 200 pounds of nitrogen, and then the product used on half of the field to really see if there was a difference where we used it versus where we didn't. That's huge. The last thing is read the label. If there isn't one, ask for one. Or ask for a recent analysis of the product. If there isn't one, I would really start to ask a lot of questions, because you don't want other contaminants or heavy metals accumulating in your soils, which could cause issues, major issues down the road. So basically what I'm saying, call around, ask. Ask your agronomist. You can for sure ask your extension specialists as well. Just ask around. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, so taking a little bit of time this year to have some small parts of your fields be that untreated check area, so that you can see how it is responding in your own local soil type, your own local weather conditions. And don't just do it one year, because we got to take in lots of different variability. So then work with that rep and try that product, in future years as well, to give it an opportunity. The other thing is that the current atmosphere that we have in agriculture is that all of your practices on the farm need to be your absolute best. Nutrient management is a tool that can help farmers take a closer look at their farm practices. Tim, what would you say to a farm who is on the fence about NMP?
I would look at your farm, how your farm benefits from it. Are there tax credits available to you? Are you in an ag enterprise zone? Wisconsin does offer some tax incentives to do a nutrient management plan. A nutrient management plan also provides or should include a manure, and it has to include soil tests, which will inventory available fertility and really help you do a lot of planning. It can be a nutrient budgeting tool for your farm and your crops. A nutrient management plan identifies crop yield potential and plans management of nutrients to their maximum potential. Nutrient management plans identify fields and soils that are best suited to nutrient applications at specific times of the year. Nutrient management plans are the best water resource preservation tool we have at this time, and they need to be understood and followed because we all rely on clean water. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. So we're starting to wrap up, and in summary, we'll continue with you, Tim. What do you think are the top items that farms should prioritize this year?
Crop rotation and clay nitrogen credits. Fertilizer is going to continue to go up through the whole growing season, it sounds like. Use less where you can. Substitute integrated pest management practices. If you have a cover crop out there, consider crimping and no-till planting into it, basically as a weed or a mulch blanket. Utilize IPM techniques for insect control. Monitor your crop's development, and if there's an opportunity, and alfalfa is a great example of that, if you have an opportunity to cut it rather than spray it, that's a savings on your chemical inputs. On a year when fertilizer prices can ruin your return on investment, look at withdrawing some of your farm's field fertility investments. Haley had a really good spreadsheet there showing which fields could probably stand not getting any P and K this year. Look at your soil test records closely and only put it on, where it can have the biggest impact on the growing crop. Utilize that in-field fertility. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, great, Tim. And Haley, what about your top 3 items for the listeners today?
Sure. Yeah. So Tim pretty much covered it. You can tell he's a little bit more on the chemical pest and weed side of things. I'm more of the soil scientist. So first, test, don't guess, whether that's soil, tissue, manure, know what you're dealing with. Second, when it comes to testing your soil specifically, focus in on phosphorus and potassium. And then third, we can target nitrogen. There are many ways to manage NP and K. Try something new this year on a small section, see how it goes. You never really know how it will turn out unless you try.
Yeah, thanks you guys for all of your expertise. I know over the last couple of months, I traveled to several states for different agricultural trade shows. And I would ask any farmer I could about what advice would they give to other farmers in preparation for this webinar. And here's a couple of other things in addition to what Haley and Tim said that come from farmers just like you. So they said, be efficient. Never stop looking for efficiencies on your farm. Plan to use a variety of weed and pest control methods. Plan for the unexpected. Be proactive. Save money where you can by being smart and staying lean. Understand how and what you're doing every day and how it affects your crops, animals, and your employees. Never stop improving your soils. Improve your record keeping so you know your cost of production. Talk to other growers and use your data. So, in conclusion, we do want to have you guys continue this conversation. We challenged you guys with that at the beginning. So take some of the things that you have heard and talk to your farm team, talk to your local experts, your ag businesses in your area, other local growers, because we know that there's one thing for sure is that there's nothing too hard for farmers to be able to handle. Feel free to contact Haley or Tim This is also the time that we have our CCA scan up. You'll be able to use your CCA app to scan the QR code right now. And we will be sending out a follow-up email, and there will be a survey where we're asking a special question about what you feel are future challenges that could be out there. So make sure you look for the survey that pops up at the end. And Kate will be coming back on to look at some of the questions and ask Tim and Haley about those questions that you've put into the chat box during our presentation. And should we have not enough time, we will respond to those questions via email. And once again, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. Kate?
Thank you so much, Chris. As Chris had mentioned, I'm going to go through some of the questions that came in via the question and answer box, as well as the chat window. Feel free to ask any more as we're going through this open discussion. The first question that we had come in, do you take into consideration the subfield environment when talking about soil or when thinking about soil tests?
Oh, okay, I'll go. So as far as like subfield environment and whatnot, so when we're doing a 2.5 acre grid, we just kind of set a grid and we typically collect like the different sub environments. When we're sampling for nutrient management plans, what's required is a 5 acre grid. And with that 5 acre grid, we tend to not get as many of those sub environments. We want to sample what the majority of the field looks like. So I'm not sure if that answered the question or not. You can send me an email. Tim, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, that's what I thought they were asking as well.
Great, thank you. So another question that we had come in is, what do you see as the best practice of growers positioning the farm for future generations?
Well,
kind of like, oh,
go ahead.
You go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, like we talked in the presentation, being innovative, working on, family-wise, kind of passing it down, sharing, just open communication is huge. What were you going to say more so, Tim?
Well, I was going to touch on that as well. And something that's near and dear to my heart is have your farm succession in order. About 80% of the farms in Wisconsin are family farms. And it's always really frustrating to see farms break up after the patriarch passes away. It really is something that everyone should be considering as they get ready to pass it on to the next generation. Another thing is I would think start leaning towards no-till planting if you can. If you're about to get some new equipment, no-till planting can save the soil and it can also save fuel. In-house on-farm equipment maintenance really can help the budget a lot. I'm not trying to put down the service people, but it's sometimes it's easier to fix it by yourself than it is to get the maintenance guy out there. And then be ready to diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't jump in with both feet. We've talked about that several times through there. And I think it's really a good lesson for all farms to be successful, positioning for this year, next year, and into the future. So thanks, Catherine.
Not a problem. And then we have just a couple more. In relation to being a nutrient management planner, what do you see farms doing now to prepare for the Future Clean Water Act?
Have a plan and follow it.
Anything else?
Well, there's a lot of things to plan for, but a lot of it just comes with inefficient farm operation. So go ahead, Haley.
So just as far as working with my growers, it's more so I'm on the let's move forward. Let's not try and put a Band-Aid on a project when it's really not going to work in the future. Why waste money kind of a thing. So let's try and be progressive moving forward. Something that has come across with some of my larger farms is like 100% containment. Okay, are we going to have to do, is it still 180-day storage, or should we be looking at 12-month storage? So let's try, not to say that we have to do the 12-month storage, but it's just one of those things, like things to think about.
Great, thank you. And our final question, with today's mini ag challenges, what parts of your work makes the most difference?
So I got into this job because I couldn't farm myself. We sold the cows when I was little, but I knew I wanted to stay in agriculture. I wanted to help farmers. I was originally going to go with an ag agent, but I decided, nope, that's still too governmenty. I fell into this more so to be a liaison. So with my growers, it's more so you tell me what's going on and I'll figure out programs, or I'll do all the communication with the governments. That way you can keep farming. That's how I guess I get my kicks. I also really like looking at data. That's kind of like with my master's project, I went through a lot of data. So it's fun to look at the soil tests and compare, see how we're progressing, how we've changed, how we can improve, kind of a thing. What you got, Tim?
I also like to think of myself as a liaison between the farmer and the regulators. They both have jobs to do, and sometimes they seem to be counter to each other. So if I can be the buffer between them, I'm glad to do it. There are times when I've had growers that just get frustrated with the regulations that's being imposed on them, and I like to think that we can define them and figure them out and work past it and be better for it because of that. There's this job in my career in agriculture as it's presented many challenges through the years, but as a nutrient management planner, and it's really been kind of drilling down and focusing on how we can help farmers become profitable and maintain their operation and still protect their water resources. Everybody, and I said it before, but I really truly believe it, everybody has a stake in clean water. And cows, being that they are ruminants and do retain water for quite a while, they really probably need nitrate-free and clean water more than us humans do. And I've seen too many farms that have osmosis or and clean water cleaning apparatus on their well, just because it's been neglected for too long. You know, we've got nitrates, and those are expensive to run. So if we can avoid that situation and try to help them protect their water resources, I think we'll all be a lot happier. And Haley said something earlier about relationships with the neighbors. I think that if you get involved and you let the neighborhood know that you're really working to protect their environment as well as your farm's environment, I think that goes a long way to good relations. So that's all I'd say on that, Catherine.
Well, thank you so much. We've officially exhausted all of our time. So I appreciate everyone for submitting any questions. Anything that we didn't answer will be responded to via email, as well as if you do have any further questions, feel free to email Tim or Haley. Be sure at the end of the webinar, you will have a screen pop up with a survey to fill in what you see as an ag challenge, as well as rating and giving us some feedback for the webinar. We appreciate everyone's time today, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.